Welcome to Positive Filter with your host, Philip Wilkerson, a podcast that focuses on friends, family, health, and career with a little self-help around the way. Please join me in this journey for self-improvement, and I hope that what I have to share will make you a better person, thus making the world a better place.
Yeah, I just listened to a few of yours.
Yes. So hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. It's Philip Wilkerson back with another episode of Positive Filter. The boy, a.k.a. Prince of Positivity, a.k.a. I got Austin, Texas on my leg, a.k.a. I just make up this podcast as I go along, a.k.a. just gives me an excuse to talk to awesome people. And so now I'm joined by a very special guest, Maria. But let me give a little background. Sometimes most of my guests have been new people I've met before for the first time on my podcast, but I've had the luxury of meeting Maria in person, face to face, when we both tried to be speakers at a TEDx event in Tyson's. She shared her story briefly with me. I shared my story briefly with her. We weren't selected to be great speakers, but I said, you know what? Well, actually, I saw you. We seen each other twice because we did TEDx in Tyson's and we did TEDx Ocarina Bay. I can't even pronounce it correctly, but the one in Alexandria. And we were able to listen to each other's story when we did a 3-minute pitch. And I was like, in the 3-minute pitch of her overall TED Talk, I was like, wow, I have to connect with this amazing individual. I had to get her on my podcast. And also, additionally, I had to listen to her book. And her book was 50
after 50,
yeah,
reframing the next chapter of your life.
Well, I listened, I'm not good with titles, but I think her book was amazing because I listened to it all the way on Audible. I crushed it in 1 week. I think it was amazing. So I had Maria on the episode to join me today. But Maria, give the listeners a little bit background about yourself.
All right. Well, I'm a lawyer and an author and a recovery mentor. I'm 7 years sober and also a sexual abuse survivor. And I mentor young women who are also not just survivors, but thrivers in both of these areas. I practice law in the Washington, D.C. area. And 50 After 50 is my 4th book, and it's very personal. It's about my recovery struggle, getting divorced at 50, getting sober, and becoming an empty nester, and what I did to explore the contours of how I wanted to live the next chapter of my life, which is via 50 new things that I tried. In the physical challenges area, spiritual practices, social activities, learning and teaching. And the other one was, I think, thrill-seeking ventures.
There you go. Yes.
There you go.
There you go. And kind of going, I think one of the main things was that throughout the book, you talk about living a life of purpose and being purposeful with your life. And what I loved about the book, and we'll go into different aspects. I took notes every time because it was just it spoke to me because it was very, I'm not saying simplistic in a bad way, I'm saying simplistic in a way like I tangibly could take some ideas from your journey and actually apply them. There is a very applicable book. But I love how before you start the book, you give us a little bit of background about your experiences and the things that led you to write this book. And then you go into the list of 50 things that you've learned over your life. But like before the listeners, before you even get to the list of 50 things that you did, what got you to that point of writing a list in that format for the book, rather than just kind of a different type of style of self-improvement book? What made you think of a list format?
Well, I am a list person in general for getting things done in my life. I need to put pen to paper to keep myself organized, and I journal a great deal. But what happened was at age 40, I had this huge All About Maria party. and it was really out there. I had trivia games about me, a life-size video of myself and slideshow, and it was very indulgent. At 50, because I got sober and divorced, I just wanted to hide, and I didn't know what I was going to do with my life. I felt completely rudderless and adrift. So I had to pull myself together and figure out, what the heck am I going to do? When you get sober, you're supposed to change people, places, and things that are triggering to you. So I knew I had a lot of changing to do. So one of my friends suggested, well, why not try 50 new things? And that was an aha moment. So I started this list, and it was not a strict list. It was very organic. As I learned more things I wanted to try through reading or people's suggestions or life experience, I added and subtracted from that list. And what I came up with was loose categories of things I wanted to change in my life. And what happened was people started asking me for the list. What did you do? What have you tried? And it started resonating with a lot of people, not just people turning 50, but people who are feeling kind of adrift in their lives. So
I love it.
In the book, I have sample things you can try. I have a website and lots of social media where people can share different things that they've tried. And now I'm working on 60 after 60. I just think it's something that keeps us really vital and engaged and growing if we keep looking forward to things that we want to do to enhance our lives. And every time someone asks me, for instance, to do something, I ask myself, does that bring me closer to who I want to be? Or am I just doing it out of my old people pleaser kind of format that I've had most of my life? Or is it depleting my energy unnecessarily? So I'm a lot more intentional about how I spend my time every day. And that's a huge change in my life. That's probably one of the biggest changes in my life, is practicing the pause and really reflecting on whatever's before me is, and if it's something that's going to enhance my life or detract from it, or is just out of a sense of obligation because I feel like I'm not good enough and I can't take time out for myself if I have that mindset. So really realigning how I choose to spend my time.
I love it. And I'm going to tag you on Facebook because you inspired me. Right after I read your book, I made a list of 50 things I wanted to get done in 2019.
Nice.
And then things that I didn't get done, I rolled it over and I did it again this year. And it was a cool list. And it just gave me, for me, I agree with the intentionality of life, is that it gave me like goals. And and I didn't even get bummed. You know, the ones that I didn't get done, I didn't get bummed about it. It just said, okay, this is something I'm going to attack in the next year. I'm a person of intention too. And I like to see it to believe it. Do you keep your list visible for yourself? I know you shared it very vulnerably with the world, but how do you come back to it? Is it framed somewhere? Is it in your phone? How do you come back to it for yourself?
My phone contains a list of things that I want to keep trying, new things. I'm continually putting on my list of things I want to try, places I want to go, things I want to expand about how I can serve the world and serve the people in my life and bloom where I'm planted or expand different horizons in my life. So yeah, I'm continually trying to grow and think of ways that I can expand my intention, which is to make the world a better place because I was here. And that manifests in a lot of ways. And I know that's something that you do too.
Oh, yeah.
You can't possibly be near 50, by the way.
No, I'm not. I'm 34 years old, 34, turning 35, but I felt like that list was kind of like not, I don't know. I felt like I just like I like the word 50. I like the number 50 because it's half 100. And then if it was 100 things to do, I think I wouldn't get it done. So I was like, I'm more like a random person. I was like, 50 sounds like a cool number. Let me get it done. And,
Good for you. Good for you. Yeah. A lot of younger people have looked at this book as things that they are glad to know at a younger age, so they don't have to make these mistakes in their lives, and they can start enriching their lives right away and living with intentionality.
Oh no, you took the words right out of my mouth, because some of the things that I'm beginning my journey of parenthood, I have 2 young children, and I literally wrote down some of the ideas about how to be a good father, some of the things I can do now, learning lessons from you. And, you know, obviously hindsight is 2020, but for me, your book served as a informal mentorship to me. Like, it felt like,
Wow.
for me, it felt like I had a mentor. Like, if I were to ask a friend, hey, what do you think about this way to raise your parents or raise your kids? It's not gonna give me all the answers. You know what I'm saying? It's not an answer book. It's more of a guidebook. Like, maybe I can think about, finding my identity. I think one of the things that you really spoke upon was finding your identity outside of your children, because then you'll be more effective for your children. And so now I know in frontal lobe, one of my biggest responsibilities is being a father, but at the same time, I want to have that balance of me achieving goals for myself where I don't lose myself in parenthood.
Absolutely. That is a big message in the book. And another thing that I wish I could do over with my kids is when I was home and with them, to be truly present with them at that moment, to not be checking my emails, to not be thinking about what I was going to make for dinner, just to be truly present with anyone, really, is one of the biggest gifts that you can give to another person.
Yeah, that sparked one of my ideas during that year last year too. It's like I did no smartphone and I used a dummy phone, like an old, and I did it for at least 40 days because I intentionally was like knowing I was catching myself on my iPhone too much. But if I had this old flip phone, I hate it so much, and the text is trash, that it forced me to be very present with my kids, and it's noticeable. So there's ones where I literally was just going down, and as you were saying your things on your list, I was just saying really sporadic keywords, but there were ones that were just crazy. Like, I love it. I had to describe it. I'm gonna jump around. But one of the things you really touched upon that really touched base with me was your vulnerability. And you did talk about racism and childhood trauma. And for a person of color, such as myself, a Black man, I never really look outside the bubble of my Black experience. And not to say, not in a racist way, like, I think, just what I identify, I really have a hard time, but, I'm mostly thinking like, what ways have race and that played in my experience as a Black man? But it was great for you to show that vulnerability about how race hits you as a biracial person.
Yes.
And 2, how I treat my children who are biracial. So can you talk about that experience just briefly, about the embedding of racism and now how that plays out currently within your list and your life and your identity, how that plays on in the next 50 years of your life?
Right. Those are really good questions. And I think it's natural that we all look through the lens of our experience. So I needed to do a lot of reading by such authors as Ta-Nehisi Coates to see the world through the eyes of an African-American man, because I think that we all have different struggles. For instance, I probably won't get pulled over for being Black. But there are different things that you have to look out for. The kinds of microaggressions that I experience as a dark-skinned woman who is parent of white-looking kids is that people assumed that I was their nanny, for instance.
Yeah.
I wrote
That's
this
funny.
kids book.
I get that too, and I ain't gonna lie. I get that all the time too. People look at my children, and my son is so light-skinned that he looked like, I literally have to be proved. Like, one time I was actually wearing my son in a baby carrier.
Yeah.
And someone said, "Is that your son?" And I was like, they were like, "No, just some random Black dude that's walking around with a white baby." Those are things you think about.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
I wrote this book called Mommy, Why is Your Skin So Brown? Because so many people did it that the kids were like, Mom, why are people assuming you're our nanny? And I have a friend, a Black friend, the police were called when he was trying to get his white-looking kids to get out of the park, because to go back in the car, because little kids don't want to leave the park.
Right.
So
Yeah.
my hope for our society is that as more and more families don't fit the cookie cutter mold of a generation ago,
Yes.
that our consciousness will be collectively raised by people like us who have biracial and multiracial families.
Yeah.
So when I was growing up, I grew up in an all-white neighborhood and felt very other than. I felt like I didn't fit in here, and I didn't fit in my mom's country either. So there was this feeling of otherness that probably propelled me to become a perfectionist and try to make up for what I thought were my faults, when they weren't really my faults. They were just how society was viewing me as a person of color. So it took me a long time to really learn to appreciate myself and love myself for who I was, and believe that I am enough in whatever color person that I am. So yeah, it did lead me to try some different things in my 50th year, and to stretch my comfort zone, and to understand that what other people think about me really isn't my business, nor is it something I can control. I made myself really sick trying to control what other people thought of me, but I had to drop that rock of self-judgment so that I could grow and move on as a person. And I'm so glad that you and younger people are finding things like this before you get to my age, so that you can drop these feelings of self-judgment and allowing other people to pierce your feelings of self-worth. There was another book that was so impactful in my life by a Toltec shaman named Don Miguel Ruiz, The Four Agreements, and learning how we shouldn't take anything personally, because everyone comes to an experience based on all of their experiences. Like if someone cuts you off on the road, you don't know what has happened in their life that day. They could have gotten a diagnosis that they had 5 months to live, or gotten fired at that particular moment. So it really helped me view people more like Rumi's comparison, the poet Rumi, that we're all like trees. Some of us get a lot of sunlight and water, and others of us don't, when we're overshadowed by shade, and so we grow this way and that. And if I approach every person I meet like they're a tree, whether they got what they needed or not, it gives me a lot more compassion.
Yes.
So it really informs my life. Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, not at all. And I'm working on my active listening, because because you're dropping such gems today. But like, one of the things that had me saying, wow, wow, wow. Well, there's two things that kind of go on. Is one was that experience of not enough. I felt that as imposter syndrome. High achieving. I'm now understanding that what that it has visibly shown. I'm never good enough for a certain space, because of maybe I'm the one only in that space. So like, for instance, they're gonna find out I don't belong here because I'm a fraud. But then I realized logistically, when I take the hat off of that insecurity, I realized that I did all the things in the job requirement. I earned a seat at the table, and that imposter syndrome usually hits high achieving minorities or high achieving women. Because you don't feel like you belong there, and that touches base. But one thing that
even though you have won so many awards and have gotten so much recognition for all the wonderful things that you do.
Well, that was, quite honestly, that's been in the past year since we met. I've had a lot of previous experiences where I wasn't achieving because whether I just didn't have support from previous supervisors, or I just didn't believe in myself. And so I don't know, I felt like, if I could say an MVP year, last year, 2019 was the star year for me growing. But
congrats.
I think one of the things that still brings me back home, and that was really identified with your book, was the amount of vulnerability that you shared on that book, especially whether that's in the preface of the book before we get into the list, or every item, even all the suggestions. You don't just say, here's all the answers, here's my shortcomings and what I've learned to come to these bullet point items. Like, for instance, learning how to say no. You're not just saying, learn how to say no, kids. You give us a teachable moment. Like, learn how to say no, because in the past, I pleased everyone and I burnt out. Was there a point when you were writing this list that you were like, oh God, I'm being super vulnerable. Let me just keep this list to myself.
Yes. Even today, when I meet someone and they say, oh, I loved your book, it really helped me. For 1 second, I feel like, oh my God, they know my deepest and darkest secrets and how far down the hole I went. But I learned through my work in recovery that secrets keep us sick. And the more I was trying to hold on to these secrets in my life, it's like holding a beach ball underwater. It takes a tremendous amount of psychic energy, and it pops up in different ways in your life if you don't process things that are holding you back. So yeah, while this was very vulnerable and very self-revelatory, it actually was healing to me to finally come forward with all of these things that helped me or kept me feeling less than. And so my goal is to help other people. So I talk a lot about having been raped and sexually abused. And now I have women who have come to me who say, wow, I can't believe you said that out loud or said it in your book, but I've been hiding this for 20 years. Can I talk about this with you? So I feel like it was all worth it. If I can help one person via my vulnerability, then it's all worth it. And now I have a vehicle for helping many people overcome things, and that makes it all worth it. So
what has anyone that's done you injustice or hurt you in the past read your book and come to apologize to you?
No, actually, not in so many words, but maybe through their actions. We call that in 12-step programs living amends. So while I would have appreciated a specific I don't know, acknowledgement or apology, some people aren't ready to do that, but they're able to live their amends towards me through kindness, and I appreciate that as well. So I think if I hadn't gotten sober and entered a 12-step program, I probably wouldn't have been able to come clean on all of these things that happened in my life and to heal from them. And nobody has to go through the actions of putting this in a publication.
Yeah. I saw that.
I really implore people who have pain in their lives to talk to at least one other trusted person so that they can allow someone else to bear witness to their pain and grow from it and move past it, because keeping it within ourselves can just corrode our spirit if we don't let it out and try to process it in some healthy way.
Yeah, I think one of the things too, I mean, I totally agree that I have to practice what I preach. I got my master's in counseling, and I call myself a wounded healer. I don't know if you heard that term.
Yeah.
Like, for me to be as helpful as I can to other people, I need to address that I have flaws and wounds, and that to be a healer of someone else, you don't need to be flawless. You know, like, for instance, while I'm not going to tell every certain person I'm working with and dump on them or transfer my issues onto them or self-disclose, right? That's not helpful, because, you know, usually what I've learned in counseling is what I'm saying with the intention of helping someone else or just kind of getting off my chest. But also, I have this self-disclosed working with students like, yo, I don't know what I want to do with the rest of my life. I'm about to graduate. I say times like, oh, you know, just to let you know, that's where I felt like when I was in college, you know, like, so I self-disclose some kind of issues that I've had, and it's allowed me to build rapport. And so also I've learned with that wounded healer is that for you to heal someone else, you can have your scars, your battle wounds. You don't need to be perfect.
Absolutely. And you're more relatable and I think trustworthy if you're able to share something about yourself. Definitely.
Yeah. And then I love what you said about, you know, finding a trusted person, whether that's a real counselor or therapist. But one time, I think other vehicles of letting it out, and I think that's what you did, is in the form of writing. Now,
Definitely.
mind you, whether you published a book or not, maybe it could have been a good experience for you to get it down on a piece of paper,
Mm-hmm.
or other people, artists, to get out their anger. They draw a picture, a really angry picture.
Mm-hmm.
I think art or creativity is a great way to reveal, get it out of yourself.
I completely agree.
Do you feel like this outlet of writing was one of your ways of getting that out?
Definitely. I'm a real fan of going on retreats as well. And I've led some retreats where some of our participants who want to be more private than I am will write down their intentions and the things they want to leave behind and their hurts and their troubles. And we have a ceremony where we let them go in a fire, like a fire ring or something. And that is really healing. But yes, to answer your question, putting things in a God box is another way of letting go of things.
Yeah.
Write down the things you want to let go and put them in a box and pray, whether you believe in God or not. You can believe in a higher power, the universe, just something bigger than yourself is helpful to try to give up these things too. And I learned something really interesting that has helped me let go of anger, which is if you have anger towards another person, it's like drinking poison and hoping that other person dies. That it really hurts us to have anger festering within ourselves.
They probably didn't even know they hurt you. They don't even care. They probably moved on.
Yes, probably.
I've always thought about that. The people that we hold grudges against, most times, I've noticed this too with forgiveness and stuff. I have done two things. Either I wrote out a letter, wrote a letter to the bully or whatever, and then that's it. I got it out on a piece of paper. I never sent it, whatever. It's gone. Or most times I built up the courage and I've actually addressed the people that hurt me. And guess what I've learned? Most times they're like, "Oh snap, man, my bad. I didn't even know I did that." I recently addressed to someone I remember one time where you made me feel like I wasn't black enough, and you said all these comments to me, and they're like, "Oh snap, bro, I didn't remember doing that," or that was a bad joke. I didn't know that you internalized it. And you're right. I'll hold on to something, and that literally was not their intention, or they don't even remember it.
Well, I applaud you for not just sitting back and letting it go, to really talk to someone, because you probably raised that person's consciousness so they won't do it again to someone else who wouldn't have the courage to confront them and say what was on your mind. So
but I love that viewpoint about letting go of anger. It only, at the end of the day, anger, hurt, and burden, usually most times, is internalized, and the main victim is you. And it's probably
definitely
you are a perpetual victim because you're only inflicting hurt on yourself over and over again, while other people may have not necessarily, either one, they don't know they hurt you like that, or two, they did, they don't care, and they moved on. You know?
Right. Absolutely. Because we all have our own experiences, and one thing might seem really important to one person and just forgotten about the next day by the other. You're right. Absolutely.
One of the things I like, and that is continuously coming up through your book and just multiple different times on your list, was kindness. I love it. I gravitated to that. Where, when you thought of your list, did you actually study happiness and the art of kindness, or you just realized, let me do something nice for someone, I did these actions, and then you did the study of kindness? Which one preceded in this case? Like you intentionally being kind, or you learning about being kind and then doing intentional kindness?
Well, I like to think that I have been kind for my whole life, but I did learn through my work in recovery that doing something for someone else gets you out of your head, that it helps you, I don't know, get over something that it's easy for many of us, including myself, to get on the pity pot, to think, oh, my life is so bad. Oh my gosh, this is so horrible. But if you get out there and help another person, you realize that every single human has struggles. And even though you may only see the highlight reels of social media in someone's life, every single person has problems. And I read this study where if you walk up to any person on the street and say, hey, I know what happened and I'm really, really sorry, every person would resonate with that and say, oh my gosh, thank you, or at least feel it, because we all have struggles and burdens. So I'm not sure if I read about kindness and how it helps us before writing the book. I think I probably did. But the other thing I learned as a person who needed to learn more humility as a person in recovery was that I tried to do random acts of kindness without anyone knowing about that.
Yeah.
And that could include just being kind to Mother Earth, just picking up trash that no one has to see that I'm picking up every day, or any one day. Just doing one thing nice for another person helps to increase my feeling good about myself. If you do esteemable acts, you increase your self-esteem. So it helps the other person and it helps me to feel better about myself. So everyone wins.
Did you ever do that thing? Did you ever walk up to someone and say that, the random phrase?
I haven't done it yet, but you know what? I've just remembered it through this conversation, and I'm going to do that.
I don't know. I'm gonna try and see how many people look at me weird, because I gotta camp it. I love the thing I love about your book, and I love about learning about this stuff is its tangible actions.
Yeah.
I'm an actioner. I'm an action-oriented person. Fear setting, exposure therapy. Try something and just do it. I'm a doer.
I love that about you, and
I
am too.
And so I love when they were like, when I learned the study of happiness. I actually studied UC Berkeley's A Greater Good Thing, is I love that they actually gave me tangible actions. Like, how about today you send 10 texts to people and say, as you just said, have a nice day, and see what the response is. It's like, wow, I could do that. That's a real action, And I love that your book gave us real actions too.
I love that too. I'm going to look up that UC Berkeley Greater
Good. Yeah, it's a whole thing. And they have what they call social experiments, where you just try different things. Like, for instance, one of the things is that you take someone that really hurts you, and then you try to look at their perspective as if they're not a zombie, like really break down what their experiences are. And it's like an exercise, like what are their demographics? Where do you think they're from? How can that affect their decisions? And you'll realize, wow, as you said earlier, maybe a certain such person was a product of X, Y, and Z. Who knows?
Yeah. I'm thinking more about you having gotten this book and studying all these things so early in your life. I've read a lot about people on their deathbeds and what they most regret in life.
Yeah.
And what the biggest one is that I wish I'd had the courage to live a life true to myself and not the life others expected of me.
Yeah.
And the second one is, I wish I hadn't worked so hard.
Yeah.
Then I wish I'd had the courage to express my feelings, which you do. I wish I'd stayed in touch with my friends.
I could do that.
And I wished I'd let myself be happier. And so I feel so great that you will not have these regrets. And if I will have some regrets, but starting from 50 on, it's not going to be one of these. So
yeah, that's mine too. I know this sounds morbid, but every day I wake up and I say to myself in the mirror, one day I'm going to die.
Mm-hmm.
And I acknowledge that in my mortality, right? I acknowledge it. Like I just well could die. But then I flip it and say, okay, if today is the day I die, what is one thing I did that progressed myself or others forward?
Yeah.
So, and it also makes me feel like it's not just so overwhelming about life, right? Like, if I close my eyes and go to my funeral, most people are not going to shade me and say that I made their life worse. That's one of my things.
True.
And
did you share that in your TED Talk?
Yeah, but I
love that.
But
yeah.
I keep on replaying that. Like, I replay that in my mind. That's my intentionality, is that I'm not going to be here forever, and the only thing I have to live, the only thing that's going to carry on is my name, Philip Wilkerson, Philip Winwood Wilkerson III, right? And then my boys will have that name, and that's the only thing I can affect. Money, all that stuff, whatever. But the only thing is, I do have fears. Like, one of my biggest fears is dying a very painful death, because I don't want to hurt. Like, I don't know. And there's some ways I can prevent that, like taking care of my health and not getting the disease as much as I can prevent. And then one way is, like, a regret would be, I swear to God, I do not want to die alone. And when I say die alone, I mean, like, if I'm in a hospital bed and everyone leaves the room and I'm by myself. No, I meant like legit, like no one even visits me. No one holds my hand. No one, I'm old, I'm elder, and no one's just really taking care of me. My family, my friends. I don't, I'm living in a house by myself, and no one just visits me for months. Or gives me phone calls, and I realize I can lay the foundation to, at least in the best scenario I can. I can't control everything, but I can do actions that will help at least curb that, like that people won't leave me alone when I pass away.
Definitely not. I mean, you have a strong family, you have a lot of community around yourself, and you are laying the groundwork for a really rich life of friends, family, and all the good you're doing in the world.
Yeah, and I definitely don't want my name to be a bad one. Obviously, this sounds really crass, but no one can be named Adolf Hitler ever again.
Oh, that's true.
Right? Like that name is now, even if it's a really cute little boy and he wants to be Adolf, you're gonna be like, dang, his name is Adolf. And they're gonna associate that. He ruined that whole name for generations to come.
That is true.
Or
That is
Joseph
very
Stalin,
true.
or all these really terrible dictators. They literally have ruined that name, that no one can ever be Joseph Stalin Wilkerson, because their name was so terrible and the legacy they have is terrible. But if I named my son Martin Luther King Wilkerson, they're like, oh, okay, I see what you did there. That was a cool name that paid tribute to someone.
Yep.
But that's the only thing that you have, is your name and your legacy.
Yeah, and I think this Positive Filter podcast is going to be your legacy. Just think about your kids listening to this and all the good you're putting out in the world.
Yeah, and I hope they also listen to me too.
Well, good luck with that.
I know, I'm saying, man, my kids are off the chain. I swear to God, Lord. So let me ask one more question related to the book, and then we're gonna go to my segment of my show. But one thing I also gravitated to you and your book was the thought of minimalism. I really tied to that, and one of the things I tied to that because in the pursuit of your career, I know you're super accomplished. You had it. You had all the things. I just say all the things. How did you come to minimalism as a way of thought? And how when you incorporate it in this list, how has it really helped you in the next 50 years of your life? How did you come to that mindset?
Right. Well, at my age, a lot of my friends are losing their parents, and I did lose my dad and had to clean out his house. And I don't think that's a burden that we should leave on our kids.
Yeah.
I think it's something that we should get started on earlier in our lives.
Mm-hmm.
It makes my life so much more simple to get rid of things. Like, things are not what's important in life, I've come to understand. It's people and relationships and experiences. So I have started telling my family that I don't want any more things. If it's a gift giving occasion, let's have an experience together. Let's go somewhere we've never been, or go see a show, or try something else. And every time I bring something into my house, I get rid of two things. Either donating them, selling them on eBay or Craigslist, or giving them to a friend who could use it better than I could. There's so many ways to give things to a better use. And I'm very intentional about if I bring something new into my house. And the less clutter you have around you, the easier it is to concentrate and to focus on things that are really important. So yeah, that has really enriched my life by being able to focus on what's more important as opposed to things, and to I don't know, have more time and reprioritize how I want to spend my time. If you have things, you have to keep track of them.
Yeah, sure.
Clean them. You have to, if it's a fancy car, you have to get it serviced. So yeah, it's nice in our society to have the things, but I've come to believe that the experience and the relationships are more important.
I love that. I love that mindset. I actually wish I like certain things, but I definitely, if someone gave me a choice between going to see, I don't know, ticket value, but someone said you can go see the World Series or go to the same thing, but it's a material thing, I would choose the World Series.
Yeah,
Because
yeah,
that'd be dope
because
to go to the World Series.
and we can't take this stuff with us. So
Yeah.
there's a certain amount there are a lot of studies about how much we need in terms of money, for instance. And after that, it doesn't give you more
Yeah.
happiness once
Yeah.
you have the necessities in
Yeah.
life.
Yeah. They said, and see, here you go. That greater good thing, they say that after $70,000, most times that, money equaling happiness, it plateaus.
Yep.
Means
Yeah.
you need to get to a certain amount to live comfortably and live good and have your bills paid. But after a certain amount of 70,000, at that point, I mean, I'm not telling people to give away their money, their salary, but just know that a higher salary past that is not going to make you a happier person.
Right. And there are also studies that if you get something really beautiful and expensive or whatever, it's a very short-lived time of feeling that pleasure. That now, instead of just feeling pleasure, I go for more contentment, something longer lasting, something serenity, something that's going to make me feel good about myself in the longer term, as opposed to a short hit of pleasure.
Yeah, that's dope. All right. Well, here's the part of the show called Shot for Shot. You get to ask me any random question. I get to ask you any random question related to the topic or not. And either you go first or I go first.
Okay, what's the best advice you ever gave one of your students?
One of the best advice, and I give it to all students right now, is living for next.
Ah,
So what I mean by living for next means that a lot of people come to me and say, Philip, can you help me figure out what I want to do for the rest of my life?
yes.
And I tell them, no, I can't. I can't help you figure out what I want to do for the rest of my life. So what I do is I tell them that it's all about a matter of next, meaning I can't tell you what to do for the rest of your life, but I can help you figure out the next step, and then you do the next step and the next step. If you ask me what I wanted to do when I graduated college, I had no clue, and where I would be at today, I had no clue I'd be here. But I was just open to the next experience, like opening to, my boy had a job with kids with special needs, and I said, yeah, I'll do it. I need a job. And then I learned there, I want to go back to grad school. And then I went to grad school, and then I'm like, well, you know what? I like working in higher ed, and it just I like doing a podcast. Let me do a podcast. So I was always open to the next experience, but I never had to have it all figured out and have my whole life planned out. And I won't also, as a career advisor, I'm not going to help you figure out your rest of your life either. That's not realistic. It's not fair. I'm not setting myself up. So I usually work with students like, what's the very next thing you want to do? And whether I try to bring it down to that one next, Philip, just help me get an internship. Okay, that's something we can work on. That's the next step. Philip, I want to go to grad school. Okay, I can help you with that. That's the next step. I want my first job. I don't, whether I like it or not forever, I just want to get that first job out of college, and maybe I'll figure out if I like this industry or not. I can help you with that, but I'm not going to help you with the rest of your life. That's not fair to
Yeah,
you or
because
me.
we all change so much.
Yeah.
I'm much different than I was 10 years ago. So I
Yeah.
think that is really valuable
And
advice.
also just in general, like you for your book, right? You got the 50, but maybe next year you adapt and you say, what's next for this year? It's the next thing. It's not like you have to have you're not writing a list of what I'm gonna do at 100 at 50, right? You're figuring out
Right.
the next year at least. So
Yeah.
that's my advice. Bringing it to the next, not to the all big thing.
I like
Okay,
it.
I got my question, and it kind of came up. I love it. Now that you're just so firm in yourself, you're living your life with intention, what do you think your legacy will be?
Wow, that's a stumper. My legacy will be my kids, who I think I've raised with good values, the writings that I've put out in the world that seem to be helping people, and the kindness that I try to do every day to make the world a better place each day, whether it's working with other women or working with other alcoholics, um, even just listening to another person. But I think in terms of tangible legacy, it'll be helping raise two really great adults and my writings.
I love it. And you know, what's funny is that I think now that you think about it, that's kind of my legacy as well.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully my boys do good things and they have a good name. And I love that you actually have a tangible thing. No matter what you do, especially like you said, you go to the grave, we die. You have a book that people can read later, post your life. Or maybe I have this podcast that maybe people will listen to. But I'm saying we left a tangible thing that it can help people beyond us, beyond our life. You know, like as long as there's, well, I guess books are more permanent. You feel me? Because if the Skynet happens and the internet crashes, all I got is this like audio recording. But you have a tangible book. You know what I'm saying? Like a book. I might have to write a book because I need something. Because you know, like what's that? You ever see that movie Book of Eli?
No, is it good?
It's one with Denzel, right? And the whole world and information. Really,
oh yeah, I did see that.
He's blind, and the only thing that survived is the book, which was actually the Bible. And he saved the world with literature, and it showed that like beyond the apocalyptic future, the power of words and the power of a book could save the world because you know he remembered the Bible off his dome, but they had to get it on paper, right? Because that knowledge can pass on beyond you as opposed to a person.
Right. But it could be that with the next generation, books will be obsolete. Nobody will have books. So everything will be online.
But we need the books in case the aliens take over or someone crashes. We need real hard stuff to touch because as you know, with technology, I'm a big proponent of while we advance in technology, we shouldn't get away from books, the hard copy books, or get away from, no matter how far we advance in technology, normal human basic behavior of talking to people face to face, right?
Well, I agree with you, but there's no telling what's going to happen next.
Who knows? I guess that was my old man soapbox now. Like, get books, kids, have real hard copies. You know?
I like it.
Buy a hard copy of her book.
Which you can get on Amazon or the library or any bookstore you ask.
Get the Audible, get the digital, but also get the hard copy in case the computer crashes. Okay, thank you so much for being a wonderful guest. The last part of this show is called shout outs and plugs, meaning you can shout out anyone you want to show some love to, and then plugs. The plugs are anything that you want the listeners to be aware of so that they can follow up with you, keep in touch with you, purchase your book. So the stage is yours, shout outs and plugs.
All right, a shout out to my mom who just got out of heart surgery yesterday. I'm actually at her house trying to help her out. Shout out to my kids who I'm so proud of doing really good things in the world. And my plugs are my next, my keynote speech I have coming up at Influencers of Midlife in Atlanta, March 26th to 29th. Okay. And you can find out about all of my events and my writings and everything else about what I do at marialeonardolsen.com, MariaLeonardOlsen.com, and join my at 50 After 50 Facebook group. It's at FIFTYAFTER and the number 50. Also on Instagram and Twitter. And I'd love to hear anybody's ideas about what they want to try next in their lives to increase the invigoration value of their life, keeping it fresh, keeping it growing. That's what I would like to share.
I mean, you've been a wonderful guest, and I definitely, you know how long I needed you on the podcast, I'm so happy. This was totally just a great experience for me and the listeners. We're going to obviously cross paths again.
We're both going to get TED Talks.
We're going to. If not, shoot, I'm about to do TED Talk Burke. Make our own TED Talk. But we're going to get there. And if not, we're going to keep trying because we have I believe we both have a message to share. And I think that regardless, my mindset with your message in mind is whoever will listen to it, so be it. But we're going to still share it because one, it's a good outcome. And two, if it helps 10 or 1 or 5 or 6 or 100, it's still worth it to me in my mind.
I agree with you. And the Positive Filter podcast is one of those things.
Yes. So, and I might have to get you again. We might have to follow up with you. We'll follow up with you when you get your next book. I might have to listen to that first before I get you back on the show, and we'll dive into that.
Yeah, my next book is about finding out some really crazy things about my parentage via 23andMe.
Oh, so it's for the parents?
No, it's about how I found out my father isn't my real father, and all the Pandora's box.
Oh my goodness!
DNA testing.
Oh, I know that's going to be I don't know, a tea sipper. I don't know what you call it. I'm gonna have to get that. I'm gonna have to check that out for sure. So
right.
Please, listeners, follow with Maria. She has all the stuff, all the things will be in the show notes. Please follow with all the links, all the things. Please leave questions for the podcast, either on the podcast Positive Filter form or on or leave a voicemail for the podcast at 571-336-6560. Sometimes I put the actual voicemails in the shows because I learned how to do that over time. So I'm learning how to incorporate the listeners, incorporate the questions into the shows. Please follow along. Please continue to listen, share episodes with your family and friends. It's a great episode, but this is also just one of many episodes. Please, share the other ones with your friends. Thank you so much, Maria, for being on the show. I definitely was so grateful to have you here today.
Thank you so much. I love your show, and I'm grateful that you asked me to be part of it. Thanks.
Thank you for listening to Positive Filter, a podcast that focuses on family, friends, career, with a little self-help along the way. If you enjoyed this podcast, please share it with your family and friends, and like the Facebook page, Spreading Positivity of Movement. Thanks for listening.